Hello, friends. Today we will basically do a walkthrough of ServiceNow's UI framework. Um, Basically, how it is, architected. What's the block diagram of the entire framework? Probably not the entire framework, but the basics of the framework is what I'm going to cover today. So, mm yeah. So just want to recap as to what we covered in previous episodes, right? So, episode 4 and episode 3 were related to web components, basically, introduction to web component and the example of a web component, which we covered in episode 3 and 4. So, that's the basics, you know, on which the ServiceNow UI framework is built. So it's very important that before you look into and before you actually watch this video, you go and watch episode 3 and episode 4. So today we are recording episode 5 in this series, which is Now Experience UI Framework um, in Orlando, Service Now. So let's get started. Um, so it's a framework. Now Experience UI is a framework like it's a JavaScript framework for creating UI components or web components. There are many other um, frameworks in the market that are available using which you can create web components. One of the most famous being React.js, right? So that's basically a framework that's used by Facebook. So ServiceNow has its own framework in Orlando now, which builds web components. So far, the documentation for Now Experience UI framework is, I would say, too technical. And if a normal person, I mean, when I say normal person, if an implementer, right, an integrator, not the developer or the coder, who has done the coding, hardcore coding, um, he would find it very difficult to understand, the documentation that ServiceNow has provided on Now Experience UI framework. So this is just an effort to simplify that and try to um, help you understand and what that framework is and how you can leverage that in future. I feel that there is a long way to go. Um, it'll take at least couple of releases before it can pick up the heat, right? Before it can become famous or used widely. It's just a matter of accepting the new technology and getting used to it and start using it. All right. So I feel looking at the way ServiceNow has redesigned the developer side, right? I think they have used. I think I read somewhere that they have used Now Experience UI framework to build the new developer site that they have come up with. I may be wrong, so correct me in the comments if I'm wrong, right? So that's my understanding. I think I read it somewhere. So if ServiceNow is putting so much of effort um, on this framework, making it basically um, using what they are building and right, using what they have built for their own developer site is promising. It shows that they are really investing in this framework and they consider that it is promising. So it's worthwhile to spend some time and understand what that framework is, um, as the users of ServiceNow or as the developers of ServiceNow. So it's a JavaScript framework, like I said. It's just it's in like any other JavaScript framework, and it's declarative in nature. So I'm not sure how many of us have worked in declarative kind of languages. But when it comes to declarative languages, right? You need to keep your mind open for open for looking at newer syntax, right? Brand new syntax that you might have never seen. You'll find it very difficult initially to relate to the new syntax, right? That's declarative. But once you get used to the declarative programming, right? It's it's quick, it's very fast, because you don't have to, when you declare something. So for example, when you declare a tag, it does a lot of things behind the scenes that you don't really have to worry about, right? So it's just a matter of getting used to seeing the new syntax and then using it in your code. So just keep your minds open for the syntax, new syntax that you will come across. So I'll briefly explain the basic architecture of this framework. A component or a web component using ServiceNow UI experience UI framework has these basic building blocks. One is view, right? View is nothing but the HTML plus the DOM events, and DOM events are nothing but the events which we have been handling since ages, like in HTML, on click, mouse over. These are all DOM events. We are not new to DOM events, and it's not very difficult to understand and program DOM events too in a view. So that's one major building block of this architecture. And then we have something called as state, right? Look at this as a class, okay, which has view associated with it. If you remember the example that we did, right? The example that we did for web components in episode 4, what it did is basically it created a pop-up info, right? It created a pop-up info, which is a web component. So that web component also had some HTML in it, which was built using DOM API. Okay. In ServiceNow Experience UI framework, you do not have to build the view using DOM API. Rather, you can use the HTML syntax the way it is, the way you would use it in an HTML file. You can just use it as is. I think it internally uses JSX. Don't bother about what JSX is on. JSX is all about. You can, if you're interested, you can explore it. But I think it uses JSX, where you can just use the HTML code as is. You don't have to really use DOM API to build your HTML or emit your HTML code. So that's view. And then you have something called as state. Oops. Go back. How do I go back? Previous slide. 7. Yeah. So there's something called as state. State is nothing but data that the component holds, the web component holds. That's state. And a view can update state using function called as update state. Okay. And then the web component has properties, and these properties can be updated using update properties in a view. Okay. And there are something called as actions. These actions are nothing but interaction between different components built using ServiceNow Experience UI framework, and also the application on which these components are hosted. Okay. And the way you communicate with other components is using function called dispatch. Okay. The components implement the action handlers, right? And they catch the dispatched action and then process it. That's how it works. And then the fourth building block, basic building block, there are more, These are the basic building blocks. The fourth building block is styles. Styles is nothing but the CSS that you would use in your web component. And going back to our example that we did, we also used CSS to build our pop-up info web component. And you'll have to look at video number 4, episode number 4 in this series, right? To understand what to relate to what I'm saying. So just revising again, basic building blocks of a web component built using Now Experience UI framework are view, state, properties, actions, styles. That's all you need to know to begin with. And then you can jump into more complex um, building blocks, right? The supporting building blocks for this Now Experience UI framework. I think ServiceNow will have to come up with a shorter name. Maybe we can invent a shorter name. Now Experience UI. NEU. New. New JS maybe. New JS. Now Experience UI. Okay. I'll refer to Now Experience UI as New JS going forward. It makes my life easier. And also in yours too, right? We need a shorter name, right? Now let's jump into a sample example, and which is simple. Okay. Let's walk through the steps um, that are involved in running this example. Okay. You'll have to first install Node.js. Okay, because npm, if you're going to use npm, you would need to install Node.js. So in my I think episode 1 or 2, which is related to installing. No, I think it's episode 3, maybe. Yeah, in my one of the previous episodes, which is related to working with ServiceNow apps in Visual Studio Code. I have covered how to install Node.js. Please go and take a look at that. You'll know how to install Node.js. It's very straightforward. The installer is available on the internet. Go to the Node.js site, download it, and install it. That straightforward. So you'll have to do that first. Okay, and then after you do that, you'll have to install the ServiceNow command line interface. So ServiceNow command line interface is required to basically create a project scaffolding. I'll cover what scaffolding and all that, right, with the example. Um, yeah, I'm using some jazzy words, right? So, which probably we being ServiceNow developers might not have used it in the past. So I'll try to explain it, and I'll try to make it as simple as possible. If you go and read ServiceNow's documentation on new JS framework, you'll go crazy because it's so technical. It's so technical that I think a core product developer, that document is meant for core product developer. I'm saying product developer, not a ServiceNow application developer. They'll have to do a better job for sure in simplifying that documentation, so that the ServiceNow developer, application developer, who is not kind of a core programmer, right? We are not core programmers. Uh, that's a fact. They'll have to simplify that documentation for all of us to use it, understand it, and implement it, right? So, yeah, coming back to this simple example, yeah, first step, Node.js installation. Second step, install ServiceNow CLI, right? Using this command npm install at ServiceNow/CLI space -G or -G. So using that command, install the um, command line interface. Then after you install the command line interface, using the command line interface, you connect to your instance. ServiceNow instance. I have my own instance on personal dev instance, using which I'm going to demonstrate this example. Okay, and yeah, and after you connect to ServiceNow using command line interface, you need to create a project. Okay, using this command, ServiceNow CLI now CLI project, and minus minus name, give the project name. Okay, when you execute this command, ServiceNow command line interface will create a project scaffolding. It's basically build skeleton for you. All you need to do is you need to go to one of the files and edit your code to build the components. It makes the developer's life very easy, and saves a lot of development effort, right? So all you need to do is just edit one simple, you know, JavaScript file, and you're done. So, and after you create the project, you need to run npm install command, and this command is executed so that all the dependencies are resolved. Okay, when I say all the dependencies are resolved, all the references in the project scaffolding needs to be resolved, and also you need to basically test your component, right? Test your web component that you're building. That can be done locally, and I think npm install also installs a local web server for you to so that you can test your component. um, it's a long running command, npm install, and I'm not sure if this really has to be done for each and every component, because you know it runs for long, it runs for I think around 5 to 7 minutes, right? I have run it twice. It didn't take less than 5 minutes every time. So I need to read through more on npm install as to whether this is really needed for each and every component that we build, or it's just one time activity, one time command. I'm assuming it has to be done for each and every command or each and every project. uh, that's my assumption. We'll clarify that as we um, explore more. Okay, the new JS framework provided by ServiceNow. So after you do npm install, you need to edit a file called index.js that has been created by a now CLI project command. um, you need to edit that. So to edit that, you need an editor. So for that, I have installed Visual Studio Code on my machine. Okay, Visual Studio Code is the name of the IDE, Integrated Development Environment or editor. That's what I'm using. And if you want to know how to install Visual Studio Code Editor or IDE, I have covered that in my previous videos. In this series, I think that's the video number one, probably that's episode number one. You can look through the playlist or the series, and then you'll find the video and just go through it. It's also very straightforward installation and doesn't take too long to install it. So after you edit that index.js file, you need to actually deploy that and test it. You can test it locally. Okay, I'll show you how. And for that, you need to run this command now CLI develop open. Okay, so let's straight go to the example. Let me switch the window. Let me first connect to my ServiceNow instance. I've connected to my ServiceNow instance. This is required because the reason why I connected to my instance is because I need the URL of my instance. Okay, so let's go to the command line. So first of all, you will have to create a folder for your project. I have a folder, base folder that I have created for myself. That's under web components, ServiceNow. Let's create a new folder called mkdir. Mkdir, yeah, mkdir. The folder name is maybe my first example, my counter example, my first example, my first new. Now experience UI example. Okay, so let's go to that directory. And then let's look at the steps. I'm not going to install the CLI because I have already done that, but you will have to do that, right? And before this step, you'll have to install the Node.js. Then, yeah, let's log in to the host. Now, CLI host login is the command. Minus host is, this is what I copied. And then minus user name is admin. Minus password is welcome 123. Don't worry, I'm going to change my password before uploading this video, so no mischiefs. Okay, so I'm gonna run this one. Yep, it connected successfully, and the instance is Orlando. So connection is successful. And now let's go ahead and create a project. I think that's the next step, right? Yep, create the project. The way you create the project is now CLI project minus name, project name, counter, my counter, my now experience UI counter. Counter. So what it's doing right now is it's creating the project files for me behind the scenes. Before that, it created an application scope for me. So it created all these files behind the scenes for me, and it's called that's what is called scaffolding. You just need to everything else. The framework is set up. The code surrounding the web component is set up. You just need to go and change the. You just need to go and change, fill the template. So this is the file that we need to modify, index.js. We'll get to that. But before that, you will have to run a command npm install to resolve the dependencies for this project. And like I said, this is a long running command and it will take at least 5 minutes. So why don't you help yourself and grab a cup of coffee while this completes? Okay, I'm going to pause the video and I will resume when this command completes. Okay, I'll also go and have some coffee. Okay, maybe tea. We're Indians. So let's I'm gonna go and get something for myself. Okay, be back in 5. Hey guys, I'm back with my tea. Let's get back to where we left. 5 minutes back. Though it's not going to be 5 minutes in the videos. In the video, it's because I paused it. So it's recording it now. It's recording. So yeah, see, it took 3:31 seconds, and 3:31 seconds is approximately 5 minutes, right? 5.5 minutes. So it did what it was supposed to be doing, and yeah. So let's look at what's the next step. The next step is going to be develop the component using the VS Code editor. It need not be VS Code, you can use any other editor, like I said before. So I'll go ahead and launch my VS Code. So VS Code, Visual Studio Code. Close this one because this is what I've tried before. Close my earlier workspace. Save it. So I'm adding new workspace folder, the folder that I created, which is my first new example. You can suggest a new name. Probably NEU is what came to my name, to my mind. Probably you could suggest something else, maybe ServiceNow, ServiceNow framework. Be creative, post it in the comments. Let's see, we'll choose the best one. Okay, let's select this folder, add it to Visual Studio Workspace, and this is all created by scaffolding. The project command, go to SRC folder. Under SRC folder, go to the application scope folder, and in that click on index.js. So this is the file that you will have to modify. So this is the view part. If we go back to the architecture diagram that I created for you, that's view. Okay? That's what holds HTML and DOM events. So you just need to put an HTML here. Don't worry about all this. That's declarative, right? You just need to get used to it. And once you get used to it, you'll probably get used to it. So yeah, just paste the code here. This example has been published by ServiceNow on the developer side. I'll just go and copy the code from there, coding it myself here. So let's go to Now Experience UI and go to the example, the counter example, and what I need is the code for view. So this is the code for view. I'll just copy it from here and paste it in Visual Studio. And I forgot to wear my mic. So I'm sorry about that, but yeah, that's what it is. I'm not really good at editing the videos, so I hope you heard what I said, or probably I'll edit it later. So yeah, this is the HTML code. Okay. Um, all this is doing is, it's creating a H2, right? In the H2, it's after the H2, it's adding a button called increment and one more button called clear, and third value which would be the counter current value of the counter. So this is how it looks like. Okay, this is the view, and this is in the view we have this HTML, and this is the API function which is going to create the component for us or custom element for us. And this is the name of our custom element, custom component. And this is the config object. And in the config object, as you can see, we are passing the view, which has been defined here. And we are passing other things as well. Okay, like styles and all, which we'll cover later. Okay, when we get there. Okay, so just with this, save it and see how your example looks like. Okay, it's already deployed now. When you saved it, it has already been deployed on the local web server, and you can run it now using the command now CLI develop minus minus open. Okay, and it's going to launch the Internet Explorer and show the output of this component in the Internet Explorer. Yeah, it takes some time to launch it, and I'm hoping that it's going to launch it successfully. There you go. It launched it, and let's see what it's going to show. Ta-da! There you go. So click counter. This is H2 button, increment, clear, and value. So this is just plain simple view that we have. No functionality has been added yet. Nothing is shown. Nothing happens when I click increment. Nothing happens when I click clear. Right. So let's add that functionality. Let's, first of all, let's initialize this state. This is a state data for our component. Okay. Let's go and initialize the state. And the way you do that is like this. Control C, and you can paste it in the config object, right? So what you have done is you have defined a variable, a state called tally, which has been initialized to value 0. Now you can use this tally in your view. So basically the state now has tally. So I'm going to set the state that const tally, right, equal to state. And see, that's the difference between a declarative language and any other procedural language, right? Like C, C++, or even Java, JavaScript. You don't need that semicolon there. Okay. And then we use the value of tally here. So this tally initial value is being passed to view as state parameter, and that is being stored in tally, and that's being used in the value to show the value. Now I save it. It's hard deployment. This has already been deployed on the web server, and you can see the change, and the change is that the tally value 0 is appearing here. Okay, earlier it was not. Now it is appearing as 0. Now let's add some functionality to these buttons. Okay, clicking. What should happen when I click on increment? The value should get incremented. Okay, when I click on clear, it should be reset to 0. Okay, let's add that functionality. And the way you are going to add that functionality is by adding, you know, DOM handler. Okay, click handler, on click handler, like we have been doing in JavaScript, but with a little twist in the syntax. And that is this. Okay, just copy this and then paste it here. Okay, what it's doing is it's using the helper function called update state, which is going to change the value of the state, which is tally, to +1. Okay, now let's add some meaning to the clear button. This time I think it's going to be exactly the same code, except that it's going to be set to 0. Tally will be set to 0. Okay, let's save it now and see it in action. It's getting reloaded. Hot deployment, increment. There you go. While it's getting incremented. Let's test clear now. Clear. Yep, the value got cleared. Reset to 0. Now let's go back to the code again and try to use the styles here. And we can apply different CSS styles to this plain simple component, h2 and button and label, right? So let's use styles for that. So the way you use styles is that you have a external style sheet created. You need to use that to add your styles here, basically the CSS code here, and then this style has been imported in index.js using this line. Okay, so styles will be set to styles. Just set it to styles and update the styles. Save it and update the style sheet with the example code that we have here, which is this. Okay, there you go. Let's save the style sheet. The beauty of these editors is that you can see these things here, and then you can actually go and change the colors right then and there. So that's a nice part of using Visual Studio Code or any editor, modern editor, right? So that's good. And what we're doing here is H2 will now have font as Arial and greenish, sea green as the color. Right now it's not green. Oh, it already turned because it's hot deployment, right? I saved it. I modified the code and I saved the style sheet also. So the changes are already reflecting there. The color is green and the button have margin as 4 pixels and padding as 8 pixels. Border is 1 pixel and those are dark gray colors. Let's use some different color maybe. Let's use some fancy color. How about this? Okay, let's save it. Now I'm going to demonstrate that. Okay, now the buttons are gray. Okay, I'm going to turn those green. Magic. Oh, did it even work? Yeah, there you go. That's the border color, green. So yeah, I think that's pretty much it. So if we map this code to the architecture diagram that I presented to you. Basically, this is drawn by me. It is not available anywhere else. I think this is the first one probably. So view, the view is right here, right? And that's right here as a part of config, config, component name, component config. In the component config, you have view, and view has been defined here. Okay, view, and you have state. State is this tally with initial value as 0, and then we haven't used properties, so we haven't used that. Now we can try that in another example. Actions, we haven't used actions in this example. By the way, these are not actions. Okay, the button clicks that we saw, these are not actions. These are DOM events which are part of view. Okay, and then we use styles, right? That's the basic building block of a new component. So I think um, it's interesting, once we get the hang of the syntax, and once we get into some more complex examples, we'll start liking it for sure, right? It's the um, I would say, we're just trying to explore it, and that's why we are liking it. And I like it personally. It's really good. It's really giving, just this simple example, right? It's so beautiful. It looks so beautiful. And if I compare that with developer side, right, these buttons and all, I think this is ServiceNow's CSS style sheet, right? ServiceNow's components that uh, ServiceNow's components also use a similar style sheet. So if we go to developer side, see, I think they have built it using. I'm assuming that they have built it using uh, the new UI framework. I'm not sure though. See, so yeah, I think that's about the framework, the architecture, basic architecture of the framework, simple example. You know, yeah, I think it is a good learning experience for myself too. I had to spend a lot of time reading the document, to understand the architecture. Everything looks easier when you look at it in a diagrammatic form, right? But when you start going to, when you start reading the docs, it sounds or it seems so difficult. It's very difficult to relate to it. So I had to put together this diagram that I put together to actually understand what the documentation published by ServiceNow really is saying, right? So yeah, this is your key to understanding the new framework. Okay. Hey, thanks for watching my video. I would request you to subscribe to my channel. So far, I've been posting my videos on LinkedIn, and I'm going to stop that because probably not everyone likes my videos, or probably videos being posted on LinkedIn, YouTube videos being posted on LinkedIn. And also, I don't get a feel of how many people are really watching my videos, because I don't, when someone sees videos in LinkedIn, I don't my view counts do not appear in YouTube. So that's why what I'm going to do is I'm just going to uh, you know announce that I have a new episode in LinkedIn and other social media platforms. But if you want real-time notifications, then subscribe to my channel and also click on that bell icon so that you get notified as soon as the new video has been uploaded. And I think this is way better than what we see um, in YouTube junk. This is useful. So yeah, agreed. Yeah, so watch useful. And I'm not saying don't watch junk, because junk is also needed, and I like junk too. All right, on that note, goodbye, and let's meet again in my next episode. All right, talk to you later. Bye.